We lost some of my potatoes. There were 4, just right. They've been eating my potatoes. This is not part of the routine. I would have expected it perhaps of the Hamantash, but not the raw potato. Okay. So, today, what I want to do is compare these two Jewish holiday foods in terms of one of society's most pressing problems, a problem that chemistry will play a uniquely central role in addressing, and that is how we can achieve sustainable energy sources. To begin, let's consider what makes a good fuel. It is high energy content by either volume or mass. High energy density. Essentially, one wants to be along the diagonal towards the upper right on this graph. Here's gasoline, an excellent fuel by these standards. We need only consider the holiday origins of the two foods in question to appreciate the superiority of the Latke in this regard. Try as you will, nowhere in the Purim story will you find any mention of fuel. In contrast, the Hanukkah story centers on oil and the miracle, the miracle that one night's portion lasted for 8. Indeed, as Dan mentioned, the defining characteristic of a latke and all Hanukkah-associated foods is that it is fried in oil, a reference to the miracle. With this background, let's return to our energy density graph. Nutrition facts for a Hamantash put it here at 15 megajoules per kilogram, close to sugars. Reasonable numbers for olive oil are 35 megajoules per kilogram and a density a little less than water. That puts it here, close to other oils and gasoline. But oil associated with the miracle, that would be 8 times higher in energy content for the same volume and mass. That puts it here, off the graph. Given that each latke contains a little bit of the miracle, we can view the latke as a veritable superfuel. Now, in case you feel that I've manipulated the numbers to my advantage, let me, as one of the rare representatives of the natural sciences to this forum, remind you that what sets the natural sciences apart from the humanities and the social sciences is that we can actually do experiments to test our hypotheses. And so, I have illegally diverted research and teaching funds to bring you two experiments. In the first, I seek to evaluate the potential of these two foods for making batteries. The basic unit of a battery is an electrochemical cell. Essentially, one takes two pieces of metal, one that more readily gives up electrons than the other, and connects them through an ionic medium, here a salt bridge. It's well known that a suitable ionic medium is a potato, allowing us to look at the other major component of most latkes. What I've done here is taken an ordinary copper penny, it's a little bit dark, and a galvanized, that is zinc-coated nail, and inserted them into a potato. You can see that I get a potential difference across these electrodes of about 0.9 volts. Now, when I initiated this line of research, I reasoned that a Hamantash would be relatively dry and thus have a low ionic conductivity. I was thus surprised when with a poppy seed-filled Hamantash, I obtained a voltage about 2/3 of the potato. This, incidentally, is a novel finding. It's true. Inspired by this result, and aided by my wife, who whipped up a few more batches, I went on to measure prune filling, voltage slightly higher than a potato, apricot filling, comparable to prune, and the now popular chocolate chip, negligible voltage, confirming my suspicion that that modern filling is not a legitimate one. To light this LED, I need 3.5 volts, and so I can obtain a suitable battery by connecting in series either 4 potatoes or 4 Hamantash, traditionally filled Hamantash. So I'm going to do that live, which may take me a few more minutes than I expected, given that our stagehands seem to drop my demonstration. But to entertain you while I do that, I'm going to show you a video that I pre-recorded with my daughter. Today, we've assembled a potato battery in what I believe to be the first ever Hamantash battery. And we're going to use them to light these LEDs. First, we'll do the potato. So hopefully you can see that there. And now Hannah's going to help me do the Hamantash. Okay. Which one do you think is brighter?
Hamantash.
Hopefully you can see that if you're at the right angle. If you were listening to the video, you heard my daughter argue for the Hamantash at the end. And what she doesn't appreciate is that the work required to assemble a Hamantash is much greater than to harvest a potato. And so the net energy gain is substantially less in the Hamantash case. Moreover, as a chemist, I can tell you that there is a serious flaw with this experiment. And that is that it does not involve any explosions. And so I seek to rectify that deficiency with my second experiment. With the aid of Dr. Meishan Zhao, Laboratory Director of General Chemistry, I have constructed what is commonly known as a potato cannon out of PVC pipe and, like all good experimental apparatuses, duct tape. The basic principle is the same as in a cylinder of your car engine. A spark ignites a volatile gas, driving a plug outward. Let me show you a video of the experimental setup. So here, I'm pressing a potato down onto the barrel of the cannon to extract a plug. Then we're going to use this rod to push the potato plug down to the chamber where the gas is going to be. It's important to get a good seal there. We're going to use some hairspray as our fuel. To the best of my knowledge, that doesn't violate any Jewish dietary laws. Seal the chamber, and then we're going to use a small piezoelectric to introduce the spark. That's the click you might hear. Now, I cut the video at that point because, as is so often the case in science, not much apparent happened for some time. But here's the part you want to watch closely. You can see that even on the bounce, the potato cleared the quad. Imagine that kind of force in your car engine. Now, I also wanted to do a live demonstration. Because I figured that if I aimed at the balcony, I'd only injure a few of you. But the sponsors were concerned that I damaged this historic hall. And so the video is going to have to suffice. As for a Hamantash, the component most akin to a potato in materials properties is the dough. I was concerned, though, that if the dough stuck in the barrel due to friction, that it would cause an explosion that would terminate not just the experiment, but the experimentalist. Searching for coefficients of friction, I was able to find some measurements for potatoes. This is a real article in Carrard. In the Transactions of the American Society for Agricultural and Biological Engineers. But I couldn't find any numbers for dough, despite an extensive discussion in the literature of friction in industrial mixers. Moreover, if you actually read this abstract, you'll see that the surface matters. And so I made my own measurements on PVC. What you can see here is that the angle of repose, and thus the friction, of dough is markedly higher. That leaves us, as our only option for the cannon, a fully assembled Hamantash. That's the proverbial forcing a triangular peg into a circular hole, but it's certainly not the first time in science, and so that's what I'm going to do. You can see that's how the cookie crumbles. This lack of durability is consistent with my earlier empirical experience with the Hamantash battery. There, the pennies kept coming out of the filling, limiting the lifetime. Now, despite Professor Cohen's kind introduction, I have to confess that my own research is entirely theoretical in nature, and so I want to end by deriving a relation that will help us understand our potato cannon results. There, you'll remember that the basic idea was that combustion of a gas caused its expansion. It's thus natural to turn to the ideal gas law, which relates pressure and volume to moles and temperature of a gas through a fundamental constant, R. Now, those of you who have taken some chemistry know that the use of moles is just a choice of units, and so we can instead work in molecule numbers, big N, in which case we replace the gas constant, R, with Boltzmann's constant, K. Then, solving for pressure, we can write the volume as length times area, and given that the molecule numbers are typically large, represent them logarithmically. That gives us our final result. Let me highlight the key features for the three of you who haven't caught on yet. What we have is the ideal is P for potato, Latke. We thus see contained within one of the most famous equations in all of chemistry, the heavenly nature of the Latke. With that, I want to thank Dr. Meishan Zhao and my family for aid in the experiments, and you for your attention.
We're only halfway through. Heidi Coleman is director of University Theater and also senior lecturer in theater and performance studies, where she is director of undergraduate studies. Ms. Coleman's biographical information came to me too late for me to incorporate much of it, but it has one feature I should mention. It often happens with non-Jewish participants in the great debate that the participant feels a need to explain or even apologize for her presence. This is a great error. Not only have some of our very finest symposiasts been Gentile, but perhaps this is to be expected. After all, we Jews specialize in being outsiders, and so when we have a Jewish affair, what could be more Jewish than to participate as a non-Jew? Thus, Ms. Coleman comes to us superbly qualified. Her self-assuredness was apparent immediately in her being the only, at least for a while, one of tonight's debaters to announce boldly, well in advance, what side she will take. She's for the Hamantash, and she says that her preparations for this presentation took her from her WASP beginnings in New England to Israel, that is the new diaspora, and New York, the new homeland, after which her fieldwork has taken her to London, Tokyo, and New Delhi. A great deal could be said about her exceptional work at the university as we inaugurate full-fledged theater studies and open the new theater and performing arts building, but I will omit all that, leaving it to you to learn about it firsthand when you're speaking to Ms. Coleman after the debate, and confine myself to mentioning just one of her very many amazing contributions to the theater. She has written a beautiful reconstruction of Shakespeare's most notorious play, namely, of course, The Merchant of Venice. Professor Coleman's redacted and improved version, which is due to be premiered later this year, is called The Redemption of Shylock. This masterpiece of reconstruction carries the descriptive subtitle, Merchant Schmerchant, and in Venice no less, boy. The Redemption of Shylock, in which the good Jew attains his just reward and that Putz Antonio is told gay and dread. Casting for the play will begin soon, and you are encouraged to audition. I have no doubt that whoever wins the role of Shylock will eclipse the well-known performances of Al Pacino and even the legendary Laurence Olivier. Please see Ms. Coleman to arrange your tryout. It is my pleasure to welcome this year's more than welcome outsider, Ms. Heidi Coleman.
Thanks, Ted, for the introduction, and for Hillel the opportunity to realize a lifelong trajectory of argument and investigation to ultimately realize years of research on stage. I would be remiss if I did not also thank University Theater, Dean's Men, Voices in Your Head, Men in Drag, University Ballet, and Tap That. You will understand. Theater and performance studies shares in common with this debate the dual pursuit of theory and practice inside the theater, and I feel honored to share our home with you tonight. Since I agreed to participate in this debate, many people have asked me with a slightly unsettling, hungry gleam which side I would argue, and I have found myself constantly qualifying. Well, of course, I prefer Latke's. My personal preference is Latke's, but I'm supposed to represent my field in the discipline. As a 5th grade lab student told me, it's not what you like. If I stay faithful to my discipline, I am forced to argue Hamantashen. Forced to argue the Hamantash. One undergraduate expert, one particularly excitable undergraduate expert, accosted me in the halls to confirm what she'd heard, and once the rumors were corroborated, provided me with her ringing endorsement. She believes in the Hamantash and demands that I defend it with zeal. But I'm not an actor. While I work with passion and faith and courage in rehearsal and in the classroom, rarely am I on the spot, as I was with her then, or in the spotlight as I end with you now, and this is really not comfortable. The latke is the obvious choice. It's the foundation upon which we can all agree. It lines our stomach, it fills and sustains us, plus it's really not that hard to make. As a food in this feud, the latke holds strong, and the Hamantashen crumbles. Its process of creation is taxing, its propensity for nourishment is fleeting, and there are always arguments about the fillings, which, regardless of victor, seem to end up as simply a sensory challenge in the enjoyment of the treat. Eat the Hamantashen, enjoy it, it will not last. Hamantashen stand for disorientation, transformation, and the ephemeral moment. Talia, I have to defend that. Well, if my destiny has led me to performance, it then too requires that I summon the courage to stand for the cookie.
So let's get to work. There is no question that the latke provides the sustenance. It is the solid foundation that exists in the home. It has parental approval. Originally made of cheese, the latke has always required few ingredients, few tools, making them a solo process. Grate, mix, scoop, fry, transfer, eat. The most the latke acts of creativity is the addition of a few carrots to the grater and the forethought to stock up on paper towels. Or the battle plan for removing the batteries from the smoke detector. No skill, no training. The result is a clear example of function over form. Of precision, of timing. Pastry is a high-maintenance endeavor, people. To dramaturgically unpack us, let us consider the history of the body. Has maintained its form as the three-cornered pocket originally filled with poppy seeds, with a recipe dating back to the 17th century. The process requires time and technique. The rhythmic sounds of the sifter prepare the dry ingredients to be joined by the shortening, which is not mixed, but massaged in by hand, before the entire mixture is chilled overnight. Time is required for the work to develop. When we return to the dough, new techniques are mastered. The rolling of the pastry, the slicing, the folding. This is a choreography that assumes a confidence that only results through training. It's a musical production performed by an ensemble assembly line. And the filling? While it invites improvisation ranging from the traditional comedic calling of the prune to the more contemporary dramatic darkness of the chocolate, the cookie has levels. It has emotional depth. Show me a latke that's got levels. I dated a latke once. It's also worth noting that the Hamantash's original script deftly pairs sugar and opiate, a particularly inspired choice. Because of the oil, olive oil essential in the narrative of Hanukkah. Got it. The Hamantashen and Purim, here is a more complicated and embedded connection. We know Haman's hat, 3 corners, 3-cornered cookie. We know Haman's pockets filled with bribe money, filling in the cookie. We imagine Haman bent over in shame with clipped ears, Osne Haman. And finally, Esther, who takes courage from her antecedents, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The metaphor extends and expands and beckons once more onto the bridge.
Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot. But he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day, and then will our names, as familiar in his mouth as household words, Henry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. And Crispin Crispianus shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, be he ne'er so vile. This day shall gentle his condition. And gentlemen in England shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, whilst any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day.
Must we? Must we go there? Why not remain in the shadows of skepticism? Let's munch our latkes and stop there in satisfaction. There is no danger. The cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, all this will dissolve. In the face of our non-existence, why risk prune on the face? Let me latke. I can't take the heat. And yet, with the Hamantash, there is presence. There is the fleeting moment. There is the invitation that we might dream ourselves beyond reasoning. And when we are invited to dance, why not seize that fleeting moment? The cookie calls. Hello?
Hello, I am the ghost of a Hamantashen. Would you please stop talking and wrap it up?
Okay. To embody or not embody, that is the question. this, in the presence of the story, the body, the history, the process, reaching for the Hamantash is the courageous choice. Reach beyond our comfort, the longing for discovery, for resolution. And even if we fail in the process, get burned by the prune, the Hamantash provides enough of a sugar high to reach for the next cookie. In the student Talia's eyes, I see her faith in Hamantash, and I respond by reaching back to an editorial from 1897. Talia, your little friends are wrong. They have been affected by the skepticism of a skeptical age. They do not believe except what they see. You may tear apart the Hamantashen and see what makes the taste inside, but there is a veil covering the unseen world which not the strongest man, nor even the united strength of all the strongest men that ever lived could tear apart. Only faith, fancy, poetry, love, romance can push aside that creative curtain and view and picture the supernal beauty and glory beyond it. Is it real? Talia, in all the world there is nothing as real and abiding. We have reason, will, and appetite, our aptitude for spectacle, our heart for drama, our dexterity for the absurd. It is the Hamantash that encourages this behavior and finds value in the courageous choice of now. It is the courageous choice now, not tomorrow, but now, towards the Enlightenment, towards action, towards character, towards Hamantash. And it is with the power of this house now that we experience this moment, this brief moment together.
But you're never gonna, ever gonna, ever